Hello everyone, this is Leah Whitehorse from Lua Astrology, and in this recording I'm going to be talking about Pluto in Aquarius. So Pluto moves into Aquarius on the 23rd of March 2023, and this year we just have a short preview of this transit because Pluto will exit Aquarius, go back into Capricorn to do more work there until the 21st of January next year, when we get a longer preview, as Pluto will stay in Aquarius until the 2nd of September. But there's just one more thing to complete in Capricorn, so Pluto will move back again into Capricorn, hanging out on that anaretic critical 29th degree of Capricorn until the 19th of November 2024, and then Pluto will stay in Aquarius right up until the 9th of March 2043, and then it will begin its transition through to Pisces. Generally speaking, then, we have around 20 years of Pluto in Aquarius starting this year. So who is Pluto? Pluto is the lord of the underworld, the lord of Hades, the place in Greek mythology where the soul goes after life. Given Pluto's association with irrevocable change and death, that is the kind of energy that it brings to our charts. Irrevocable change, endings, transformation. It's destruction and regeneration. Pluto is the phoenix arising from the flames. There is a relentless urge to evolve with Pluto. Its action is to penetrate into the deepest reaches of the self. It symbolizes all the mysteries, all the unknown. It's darkness enfolding. Darkness not meaning negative, just darkness, the unknown. Remember that the stars shine in the dark. It is all the things that are hidden, secrets, the gold within. Think of how we find the most valuable things under the ground. Diamonds, all the crystals. Pluto is the god of wealth. So when he takes us on this inner journey, we are looking for that wealth within. And he's the ruler of all the experiences that involve some kind of archetypal descent into the underworld. Now, often we can feel his action as intensity. That's the word that we tend to fling around with Pluto, because it can feel an intense journey, but it can also be intensely compelling. It doesn't necessarily mean good or bad. It's simply that we feel compelled towards this life-changing experience. Now, yes, sometimes negatively, as all the planets have a shadow side, we can experience the shadow side of Pluto, which is connected to the shadow. We have the collective shadow, the personal shadow. There can be issues around toxicity, power and corruption, controlling behavior, crime and criminality, pollution, obsession, abuse, compulsion, manipulation, violence, jealousy. All these more unpleasant, unsavory aspects of life can come under Pluto's domain. But generally speaking, Pluto is a catalyst in one form or another, which is inviting us to change. This transformation that he's going to take us on is eventually going to empower us. And often the way he does that is by getting rid of what is no longer relevant for us. It's past its sell-by date. It's dead. It's dying. It's gone. And we need to let go of it. And I think one of the biggest lessons Pluto teaches us is when to let go, because that's usually the issue with Pluto. The reason why we go, oh, it's going to be a horrible transit, because it is inviting us to let go of something that is no longer working for us. And our nature is to want to hang on to things. We hang on because it's scary to not know what's going to happen next if we don't have that thing, that person, that job, that relationship, that situation, whatever it is. We're scared of change. So Pluto comes along to teach us how to manage change and to recognize that change is healthy. We need change to evolve. And also, change happens anyway. Change is the only constant. So now we have an understanding of how Pluto works and the type of energy it brings to us. Let's just revisit Pluto in Capricorn. Pluto in Capricorn was all about the change of the system. The infrastructure isn't working, said Pluto. The rot has set in. There's corruption at the top. Remember, Capricorn can be associated with the authorities, and Pluto can be associated with governments, and it's about power as well. So we've got this corruption at the top, toxic establishments, and a denial of power to the collective, to the whole. It's like the power is only held in the hands of a few. So Pluto moved into Capricorn around 2008, and that is when we had the massive economic crash. Like the banks just were in a complete mess. And since then, Pluto has been working on this restructuring, raising it to the ground. Look at what happened when Pluto met the ruler of Capricorn, Saturn. Saturn conjunct Pluto, January 2020. What happened? COVID, where there were increased rules, increased regulations. Everyone felt very isolated, was restricted. Everybody learned about what it's like to feel restricted. And we could say, I know there's a lot of arguments in all different directions here, but generally speaking, there has been some suggestion that certain governments might have used the situation to create more rules than are necessary. And certainly there's been a lot of money changing hands. Pluto, the god of wealth. So we still have the signs of the toxicity, but they're becoming more exposed. The secrets are becoming exposed. We also saw, and there has been a lot of stuff written about this as well, about how over the last 20 years, whilst Pluto has been in Capricorn, there has been a rise in authoritarian regimes. There has been greater repression, and even the UK government has been seen as being very repressive because at the moment they're trying to ban strikes and all this kind of thing. So there's a general feeling that we have been backsliding. We also have the cost of living crisis, which has become acute as Pluto moves towards the end of its journey through Capricorn. I'm recording this on the 11th of February 2023, and here in the UK it is a massive issue that we are being asked to pay more for our utilities, for gas heating, and also for foods, for electricity, all these kinds of things. And yet these companies, particularly the oil companies, are announcing massive profits, billions in profits. So these kinds of situations are becoming more extreme and also more prominent. It's clear now that there is some kind of systemic corruption. There are corrupt rulers. We've also had a rise in misogyny and violence against women. We of course had the war in Ukraine, so the argument over borders. Capricorn is associated with borders. And being British as well, I have to mention the death of the Queen, which was hugely significant on a symbolic level, because the Queen was a living representation of this long history, Capricorn, of this establishment, all the things that have happened during her reign. This was an institution that was like no other, that seemed to be set in stone, and now she has gone. Yes, we now have King Charles, but there is a sense that it's never going to be like it was. And there's also been a lot of calls for change, and again the discussion about whether the monarchy is still relevant in these current times. And then finally we've had the absolutely catastrophic earthquakes in Turkey and Syria that have caused huge loss of life. But what really caught my eye from an astrology point of view is that one of the issues with this is that a lot of the building regulations were ignored. There were supposed to be regulations is a Capricorn word. There were supposed to be regulations in place. The authorities were meant to sign off on these to ensure that the buildings that were being built would withstand earthquakes, because they know that it's on a fault line. But it seems as though there has once again been a lot of corruption happening behind closed doors. So that didn't happen, and consequently there was much greater loss of life because many of these buildings collapsed. Remember, Pluto does tend to raise things to the ground. So we can see then that through disaster, through crises, that our system that we had was not working for us, has not and is not working for us. We're much more conscious now of the things that need to change. So now we have an understanding of how Pluto in Capricorn has manifested. Let's start to think about Pluto in Aquarius. To understand what might happen there, one of the best things we can do is to look back to the past. So, for example, Pluto was in Aquarius when Boudica was queen, an ancient British queen of the Iceni tribe. And she is very famous here in the UK. She's still spoken of today. And we see her as this powerful figure who stood up for her land, for her people, for her tribe. And she was fighting against the Romans. The Romans obviously came over to try to conquer us, and they won. She lost, unfortunately, but she is still seen as this incredibly brave, revolutionary soul who fought for independence. Pluto was in Aquarius for the rise and fall of Thomas Cromwell. Thomas Cromwell was the chief minister to King Henry VIII, yes, the king with all the wives. And this was part of the issue, that King Henry wanted to remarry. But at the time, the church was under the thumb of the Pope. So what happened during this period, whilst Pluto was in Aquarius and Thomas Cromwell was in charge, we had the Reformation, and this was huge. This saw the Church of England splitting away from the Pope and the Catholic Church. And this period of time, the Reformation, is considered to be one of the most significant events that ended the Middle Ages and began the modern period for Europe. And also this time, the Reformation was connected to the appearance of the printing press, or the development of the printing press. We've got the rise of humanism, which is a philosophy that is very much based on rational thought, nothing to do with the supernatural. It's much more about the human having agency. Last but not least, in this little journey through time, Pluto in Aquarius was also associated with the American Revolutionary War, so the War of Independence. The actual Declaration of Independence was signed on the 4th of July 1776. Some of you might recognise that date as the date we use for the chart of America. We commonly call it the Sibley chart. But Pluto was in Capricorn when that was signed, but the war itself lasted right up until September the 3rd, 1783, when the Treaty of Paris was signed. So Britain accepted that America was independent and the war officially ended. And that was when Pluto was in Aquarius. So as we can see from this little exploration into the past, many of the themes that are associated with this transit of Pluto in Aquarius are connected to independence, freedom, revolution, rebellion, liberation, progress, the Renaissance, the Reformation, humanity, and rationale. And if we think about Aquarius, Aquarius is a fixed air sign. Air is about the intellect. So we've got this idea of being a free thinker. It's quite a stubborn sign as well. So hence Boudica standing up to the Romans. It's like, I'm not going to be moved. Aquarius values uniqueness and individuality. It's also a sign that's associated with technology, innovation, and again, the march of progress, modernization. We associate it with higher mind and God consciousness, and it can be a very intuitive sign. It's connected to the idea of brilliance and genius and these flashes of knowing. It's not the same as watery intuition that we feel. It's more like a bolt from the blue. An idea just lands, explodes in the mind, and boom, there is the answer. So this is the kind of nature of Aquarius. I think it's also important to mention that alongside Pluto going into Aquarius, which is of course really going to accentuate this sign, the air element, generally speaking, is becoming far more prominent as we move through time. We've just had the great mutation. So in other words, Jupiter conjunct Saturn, the cycle of Jupiter conjunct Saturn has begun to move into air signs. And so for the next 140 years or so, every time those two planets meet, they will be meeting in an air sign. This time it was in Aquarius, on that 0 degrees of Aquarius. So Jupiter and Saturn emphasizing air signs, Pluto in Aquarius emphasizing Aquarius. And alongside all of that, we're going to have Uranus moving into Gemini. And whilst Uranus is in Gemini, it will trine Pluto. So it will link these two planets together. So we can suggest from all of this then that Pluto's entry into Aquarius and movement through Aquarius is going to bring some kind of massive changes in society, a complete change, perhaps in the way that we think of society, the way that we think of ourselves. There might be a lot of political shifts around this time. Aquarius can be associated with politics. We might find, like Boudica, that there are rebellions and revolutions because this is power, Pluto, to the people. Thinking about the word power, maybe we are looking at something that is air-powered or the power of the air. We could be looking at air-driven disease, or maybe it's just that this is about the pollution, the toxic air. Of course, all the problems with the pollutants going into the air are causing issues with the climate crisis. So we've got the potential for toxicity in the air or air-driven diseases. A lot of what we're talking about with Pluto in Aquarius does tend to revolve, however, around our relationship to technology, innovation. And it's interesting that just as we come towards this transit, we've had a breakthrough as far as nuclear fusion is concerned. So that came at the end of 2022. Of course, we're already seeing a lot more electric cars. I imagine we will see more self-driving cars. And that brings us to the idea of automation. And that brings us to the idea of robotics. And this now, again, has been exploding. We've got the new chatbot GBT that you can have a conversation with that's becoming much more intelligent. We have all the art AI like Midjourney and DALL-E and others. And I know that there's a lot of conversation around that, but still the technology is there to create art. We ask the robot, make art for me, and it does. Or make music for me, and it does. Or write this for me, and it does. These AIs aren't going away. They're going to become more and more powerful. Pluto. And there is, of course, the discussion of what if we experience singularity around this time, i.e. robots becoming conscious. Maybe this is the time. We could, of course, have war, Pluto, that is connected with robots. Let's just go there. There is the possibility. We have it in our consciousness. We have it in our imagination about Skynet and Terminator and all that kind of thing. I'd like to think that the scientists are building in things that will stop that from happening. But we certainly know that there can be issues with automation, with robots, with computers. What does happen once the computer becomes so intelligent it surpasses us? It might not necessarily be conscious, but maybe it's so intelligent that we can't tell whether it is conscious or not. It throws up these kinds of ideas. Now, remember that secrets came out with Pluto in Capricorn as far as what the people in power were doing, the authorities were doing, the governments were doing. So maybe now we might find with Pluto in Aquarius that there are secrets coming out regarding technology. Or maybe this is the secrets of the air, unidentified flying objects. I can't believe that on the morning that I'm about to record this, I'm reading news about the US government shooting down an unidentified flying object in Alaska. Just last week, there's been all the talk of the spy balloon. So the spy balloon, that in itself can very much be a symbol of Pluto in Aquarius. I know we're not quite there yet, but maybe it's a little bit of foreshadowing in some way. Spy balloons, things in the air that we don't understand, or the power of the things in the air. But there might be some secrets coming out. I do wonder, I have to say this because I talked about this on my Patreon last year, I think it was, whether we are going to perhaps get some kind of confirmation of aliens, that other races in other places exist, particularly when Uranus goes into Gemini, because that's just like ET phone home. Gemini is about making the connection. Uranus is connected to aliens. So we've got ET phoning home, whether he's phoning us or we're phoning them. I don't know which it is, but it does make me think Uranus trying to Pluto in Aquarius. Wow. What could change us so dramatically as a society? Some kind of fast, shocking change that involves communication from out there. It would be an irrevocable change for us as a society. Maybe it would pull us together, give us more power, empower us to realize that we are all connected. It would change the way we think of humanity and what it means to be human. So yes, we have a lot of potential for Pluto going into Aquarius, and I might just be riffing off these ideas. Who knows what's going to happen? But it really interests me that we are getting these little foreshadowing events that are happening right now that suggest what might happen when Pluto goes into Aquarius. Let's see what happens. I'm kind of hoping for the mothership, as long as they are going to be like Aquarius and be friendly. Of course, we can't forget that Pluto is going to go into Aquarius in our own individual charts. It's not just about the collective experience, it's also about our personal experience. So I was thinking about how Saturn has been priming us, yes, collectively too. Saturn has been priming us for the Pluto journey. So if you look to your chart and look where Saturn has been moving, which house has got Aquarius on the cusp, or which house holds Aquarius in your chart. If you look to that part of your chart and that part of your life, consider what trials have been happening here. What have you learned here? Where have you been tested here? Because as Pluto goes into this part of your chart, as it changes signs and activates Aquarius, then there's going to be a very big push to almost like put what you've learned into action. Remember, Pluto is the higher vibration of Mars. So we often think of Mars as the one taking action, but Pluto too. Pluto is the power, is the fuel. So we've gone through this very big learning situation with Saturn. We've kind of seen some karma ripening there. And now Pluto comes along and says, here, you need to be free, and I am going to blast this open. I'm going to get rid of what you no longer need. This area of life is due for some regeneration so that you can claim your power and live your passion in this world. That is what Pluto is doing as it moves through your chart. Now, this is Editing Leah jumping in at the end of this part 1 of this recording, because Pluto in Aquarius has effectively killed my computer whilst I have been fighting my way through the editing of this recording. So I will be posting the horoscopes, Pluto in Aquarius, through the houses for the signs in 2 other separate parts. So there is much more to come. In the meantime, I do hope that you have found this introduction to Pluto in Aquarius for the collective helpful. If you would like to hear more from me, then I do have a Patreon. I'll put the link below. And once I have got the other videos up as well for the horoscopes, I will also put the links below so that you can go straight to it rather than having to look for it. So stay tuned. There is more to come, and I wish you many blessings on your path.